Welcome back, Doug Pagitt Radio. 1:50, almost 2 o'clock on this Memorial Day weekend. We end our weekly conversation with a shout-out, a write-on, a call-out to people who are doing things in the world that are the way they're supposed to be. We give them the good old-fashioned 1970s write-on. And I've been noticing 1970s fashion coming back. My little neighbor, like 10-year-old neighbor, was sitting yesterday literally on a big wheel with flare pants that had embroidery of flowers down the pant leg. Now, Rand, I'm looking at you, and I don't know when you were born, but I'm not sure you had the glory of 1975 as a 10-year-old, 1976 as I did.
I did not.
It was awesome. Fashions, just fashions alone, they're coming back. So I like to see it. So we like giving the right on around here because it sort of conjures up that good childhood aspiration that at least I had as somebody who thought, like for me, the good old days were the 70s. That makes older folks really nervous. And they consider the fact that maybe that's when everything fell off the rails. Well, the right on goes out to a combination of people. It goes out to a author at CNN, if you can believe it. CNN people getting the right on here. Here's the story. I want to read it for you. I think it's rather interesting how the story comes together. It reads like this from CNN. And I'm going to put the link for this on the Doug Pagitt Radio page on Facebook. The biblical story of Lazarus, the story says, is happening again in Africa. At least it looks that way. One moment, men, women, and children suffering from AIDS are lying on death's door, barely able to move, open their eyes, or even speak. Then a few days or weeks later, they're walking, talking, laughing, truly appearing to have come back from the dead. Now, what the story is referring to is a Bible story of Jesus raising a guy, Lazarus, who was actually in the story dead for 4 days. Not mostly dead or almost dead, but dead. But anyway, so they pick up this Lazarus thing because there's a movement afoot that's going to get the right on. Well, this astonishing transformation of these people who go from almost dead to then being up walking around within days or weeks has been repeated all over the African continent thousands of times over the last decade. And since 2003, America, the United States of America, has been paying for it. But a budget-slashing effort in Congress this year threatens to bring much of that progress to a sudden and catastrophic halt. A guy named Michael Gerson, who's a conservative columnist for the Washington Post of all places, and is the force behind an HBO special called The Lazarus Effect, is fighting hard to hold on to the funding that started with his boss a decade ago. His boss, George W. Bush, put a lot of money into making sure that AIDS was taken care of, and now the Republican Congress wants to stop it. So who's going to get the right on? Michael Gerson, of all people. There are good foreign policy reasons to keep up this kind of work in Africa, he said. He's also a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. If you know that crowd, they're not always saying things that seem like good news to people like me. Well, Gerson was also the chief speechwriter for Bush. He would often talk about, to those who are given much, much is required. And the motivation here of what America should do and be, it's a motivation of source for us to be a source of hope, but also of kind conscience, is very much rooted in faith. In 2003, Bush started the President's Emergency Plan for Aid Relief, which, because it's government, it has an acronym, PEPFAR, PEPFAR, an unprecedented $5 billion a year program to help the world fight AIDS, and has resulted in an 80-fold increase in the number of Africans who are receiving life-saving AIDS treatments since the program began. In 2008, Bush led the charge for renewal and expansion. We can now bring healing and hope to many more people, so I ask that you maintain the principles that have changed behavior and made this program a success, Bush told Congress in the State of the Union address that year. And I call on you to double our initial commitment to fighting HIV and AIDS, improving an additional $30 billion over the next 5 years. And he wasn't alone. A driving force in that effort was, of all people, evangelical Christians who pushed the Bush administration and Congress to support it. Well, Justin Fung, who works for the district church in Washington, like many of the early backers of the effort, he sees it as a natural expression of their faith. For once, the right on gets to go out to people who are faithful and wanted to do something to bring practical goodness in the world, and good thing that it goes out to those evangelical Christians. One of the big themes in the Bible throughout Scripture is that God cares for the poor, and this is something that's important, and we shouldn't be divided on an issue like this. But division and even subtraction are precisely what threatens PEPFAR now. The program has steadily grown into a hefty $50 billion project a year. And as Congress wrestles with debt limit and $1 trillion deficit worries, foreign aid is under a sharp fire. Representative Ron Paul has been an outspoken critic of PEPFAR from the start. Ron Paul is going after this. Ron Paul said in 2003 in a speech on the House floor, "I concede that it's very well intended. I'm a physician, and I can't think of anything better than to wipe out AIDS in Africa or in the United States for that matter." But he added that PEPFAR is fighting against the current economic and social realities. That was in 2003, and he's just doubled down his efforts now. I think, he goes on to say, that if we're going to be doing any social engineering or social suggestions, it ought to be here in the United States. And we ought not to be naive enough to believe that we can change habits that occur in Africa. Ron Paul is now running for president and declined CNN's request for comment, but his office said he stood by his 2003 statement. So here's guys like Ron Paul who are saying, we should worry about us. You can't fix the nothing's going to change them. They're just destined to die of these diseases. They don't need us to be social engineering. I read a little bit into that, but I think that's pretty accurate. He wants to cut it all. So to people who are putting together this program and who are still fighting for it, for people like Michael Gerson, for the evangelical Christians who are trying to lobby President Obama to support this effort. It's not clear, because while Obama himself has praised PEPFAR for what it has accomplished, he's been slow to expand any provisions in Africa. How do you like that? How do you like the fact that the people who are trying to literally save lives with a less than 1%, half of 1% of all the money that is spent, is saving millions of people's lives who otherwise would die of a disease that couldn't be stopped and is not their fault? And who's working to do that? Who's getting the right on for this? The conservatives who have to fight off the Ron Paul Tea Partiers, the libertarians who say we shouldn't be fussing with anyone else's business. And I just happen to say from this program, right on to people who are trying to bring about these good things that are happening in Africa, right on to people who say it's part of our moral responsibility as national and global actors as a nation, that if you can do something about this, and there's nothing particularly religious about it, it is simply saving the lives of children. Right on. Good for us. And may the right on go out to all those whose faith brings faith and whose hope brings hope, whose love brings love and whose strength brings about strength, and to those who have to stand up to people who say it's none of our business, we shouldn't work for it, we shouldn't try to stop it, you can't fix Africa, to the people who need to stand up to those voices, right on. Keep it up. Keep going. We'll talk about that all day long, not only on this program, but hopefully in all centers where people want to get together to bring about the goodness in the world. So whatever you're up to this week, may your faith bring faith, may your hope bring hope, may your love bring love, and may your strength bring us strength. Doug Pagitt Radio. We'll talk again next week. Hang in there.